Hey everybody, welcome back to the training series. My name is Nate. I'm with Stanislaus County CERT and Director of California CERT Communications. Tonight we're going to be doing a great video for you. It's a presentation on ham radio and G.M.R.S. There's different tools out there and things that you can use in your local CERT team, and I just want to let you know what the differences might be. And you've probably heard a lot of these terms thrown around in your different CERT group, but maybe you're not quite aware of what they all mean and how they affect your communications in your group. So stay tuned. This will be a great exercise for you tonight, and feel free to share, like, and subscribe this video, and bring it back to your group for further training. Ham radio versus G.M.R.S. California CERT Communications. Feel free to join our Facebook group at www.facebook.com/groups/CA-CERT. When you get started into radios, you're not really sure what you're looking at if you're not a radio nerd like myself, and there's all kinds of brands out there, and sometimes it's really hard to know where to start. There's Midland, Hytera, Anytone, HYT, there's TYT, there's Baofeng, Kenwood, Wuxon, Yaesu, Vertex, Motorola, and ICOM. This can be really confusing because there's different radios, and with each types of radio, like Motorola, they have different models, and each one of those does completely different things. Some things you can do legally, and some things you buy the radios and you're transmitting illegally. So hopefully after today, you'll have a better idea of what to use with your local CERT team. So the first thing we're going to talk about when we talk about radios is I want to try to explain the different types of communication. It doesn't matter what kind of radio you have. There's something called Simplex, and I want to kind of explain these things. It's a scientific sounding word, but maybe I can break it down for you. When you're transmitting in simplex mode, that means it's just one radio that somebody's holding to another radio that somebody else is holding, and you're going straight across. When you buy these radios from Walmart or different places, they're called FRS radios, and some of them even say GMRS. But these radios have preset channels in them, and if you read the packaging nowadays, they even say they go 20 miles or so. Some of them say 22. But I want to explain to you that when they say they go 20 miles, they usually test these things in a very arid environment with nothing in between each of the radios. Like they might be in a mountaintop in Death Valley, and the other station might be in the valley down low. And there's nothing in between them. There's no moisture in the air. And in perfect conditions, they will go 20 miles. Now, when you're talking about CERT, you're probably not going to be doing search and rescue in Death Valley. You might, but I doubt it. So what we're going to do here is talk about an urban environment. When you're in an urban environment and you have houses in between you, that 20 miles, that might shrink down to 1.5 miles. That's not even guaranteed at 1.5 miles. You may only get 2 blocks. You notice the gentleman in the blue shirt there with the tie, the signal is really thick right there where he is because that's the strong signal. And as it goes through all those houses and walls and interior walls, kitchens, refrigerators, whatever might be in between the first station and the second station, that radio starts to diminish because you're going through different material. You might not have as much material. Maybe you're going across a park setting. You see him in the next line there. The signal's really strong where he is, and then it goes really strong all the way through the whole park. But then the other station's right behind a brick building, maybe a CVS pharmacy or a Walgreens. In the picture there, it says the gym, but the signal gets really broken up. If you have these kind of trouble, sometimes relocating just 10 feet away, that could really help your signal. If they just move to the left or the right of the building, put your arm in the air, all these things can help you when you're talking about simplex, where it's just radio to radio communications. The military uses a term called LPOP. It's a lookout post and observation post. So if you just have access to those little tiny FRS, GMRS radios that I showed you a picture of a minute ago, you can overcome some of these obstacles by having high elevation. If you're in an urban environment, sometimes that just means if you can't hear the station you're trying to call, you may go to the top of an overpass because that'll put you up about maybe 30, 40 feet higher than you would have been otherwise. And you don't need any special equipment. You don't have to climb a tower. Just walk up to an overpass and that'll get you enough elevation so you can go a longer distance. The idea is you're trying to overcome the obstacles, the terrain, the buildings, and get higher in elevation. So if you had somebody that could get up to a higher location, they could relay throughout the entire city. So the person in blue calls up to the hilltop where the lady is and says, "Hi, I'm trying to get get in touch with our CERT command. Can you please pass this message? The message is, we have 15 people in our shelter today. So she'll write all that information down, and then when she retransmits that signal, it goes down to the entire valley, or it goes down to all the lower locations so all the other teams can hear the traffic. This is a simplified way to pass messages in an urban environment. So if in a grid down scenario where maybe we'll talk about repeaters in just a few minutes, but if there's no repeaters, this is a person-to-person way to pass communications in an urban environment. This is the way it used to be done in the military, and it's still done today, where you have a lookout and observation post up high on a hill. Next, we're going to talk about duplex. So the last one was simplex, where it's radio to radio. This next one's called duplex. And what duplex is, it means you're going to replace that person on a hill with a repeater. And we'll explain what a repeater is, but you see on the hilltop now we have a radio tower. We don't have to use that manpower of somebody staying up there all the time relaying messages. Now we have something called a repeater. So we're still in that urban environment. So when that person keys up, that guy in the blue shirt, he keys up his radio, the signal goes up to the repeater tower. And simultaneously, while he's talking, the signal's retransmitted down to the valley at a different frequency. And if all your radios are programmed correctly, he's transmitting and everybody else is receiving. So for this example, we're going to use G.M.R.S. So the transmit frequency on this is 467,725, and that's the input to the repeater. So when he keys up his microphone, his radio is going out on that frequency. And the return to everybody else is 462,725. There's a 5 megahertz offset there. That way the transmit signal doesn't interfere at all with the receive signal. So when you're using a repeater like this, every time the guy in the blue shirt keys up, what's going to happen is his radio that he's holding in his hand generates a field of electrical energy. You can't see it and you can't feel it, and the FCC says it's not going to be harmful to his body. But anyone within about 15 feet of his body is his transmit power is going to wipe out the receive of their radio. So if you're working at an emergency shelter, maybe you're working in a headquarters where there's other people with radios in close proximity to you, maybe you're directing traffic. If you're using a repeater for long distance communications, but you're really close to your other team members, the other team members may not hear the repeater because the transmit signal from the gentleman in the blue shirt is wiping out the receive. It's making all the other radios not being able to receive. So if you're in a local setting like that, I wouldn't recommend using a repeater. Repeaters are meant for long distance communications. In a situation where if you're in a shelter or working traffic control in a small environment with each other, I would highly recommend not using a repeater and just doing the simplex. Find a radio channel that's just one radio to the other radios without using a repeater. Each way of transmitting has its benefits. Here's kind of an illustration of what I'm talking about. Perhaps your CERT team is deployed, and when you're going en route and the little green cars there to your deployment location, you would use a repeater. And you could even check in with the on-site location, whether it be a fire station or the evacuation shelter. You can communicate while you're en route through a repeater to the location. But once you get on location, you're going to want to change your radio over to a simplex channel, just radio to radio, because you're all working in a small environment. And you also wouldn't want to tie up the repeater for everybody else in the community because you're all working in a location where you don't need a repeater. So many radios have the opportunity and the ability to listen to two channels at one time. You can listen to a repeater channel on one frequency, and you can listen to the simplex channel, just a radio to radio, on the other one. So know how your channels are programmed in your radio and be familiar with how they operate so you can choose and direct your teams to use the right kind of channel for your mission. All right, frequencies. Ham radio, we're going to talk about that first. With ham radio, VHF stands for very high frequency. With ham radio, it starts at 144 megahertz and it goes all the way to 148. There's not really designated channels. It's not like you can click a dial on the top of your radio and say, I'm going to channel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or whatever it might be. With this, it's frequencies. And the UHF, ultra high frequency, the radio range for ham radio is 4 120 megahertz to 450. When you're using ham radio, it could be complicated for some of the people that are less informed about radios. If you have volunteers that have no radio experience, it might be really confusing for you to tell them, go to 145.275 megahertz. They may not have any clue how to do that. If you program the radios correctly, maybe you can make it where they're pre-programmed, where you just change channels and they don't have to type in frequencies. But that's kind of what ham radio is. It's kind of a system where you just type in the channel you want to go to. There is a license required for ham radio. There's testing. You have to go into a local test center, and I think it's going to be around $35 or somewhere in there. It's not terribly expensive, but it could be around between $12 and $35 to take your test and to get your ham radio license. There's different topics like rules and regulations. There's electrical theory. Do you know what Ohm's law is? And you have to pass the test. I think there's around 30 questions in the test, and they pull questions out of a question pool, and you might have 5 or 10 questions from each type. Like I said, the rules and regulation, electrical theory, and antenna coax lines. You have to learn a little bit to pass this test. And they have things called ham cram courses, which can help you. You read through all the questions, you read through all the answers, and the same day you take the test. So it's in your short-term memory and it's locked in. And a lot of CERT teams that I've had contact with are using this in their teams. And if that's working for you, that's great. We talked about the test. There's going to be a fee. And the great thing is with ham radio, you can do Simplex, which is radio to radio, or you can also get repeater access, which gives you that broad area coverage. If you live in a county and you want to be able to communicate from one side of the county to the other side of the county, you really need to have repeater access. So that's really important. The next thing we're going to talk about is GMRS. GMRS, you have a lot less frequencies to choose from, and they're preset channels. You can't just pick a frequency out of thin air and say, let's go meet here. With GMRS, there's preset channels, but they range from 462.550 all the way to 462.725. Then the other set is 467.550 to 467.725. So whoever's programming your radios for your group, you guys need to come up with some sort of a plan and figure out how you're going to implement these frequencies. With GMRS, there is a license required. But the great thing is there's no test required. There's just a fee of $35, and you can apply for this on the FCC website. It's called the Universal Licensing System. It's a little tricky to navigate, but I have all faith you can do it, and there's probably somebody in your group that's familiar with it and can help you with it. I really like GMRS because there's many people in your CERT groups that aren't going to want to take a test. They're not going to want to learn electrical theory and antenna and feed lines. They're just not. And if all you're using in your group is ham radio, you're going to isolate a lot of the group. You're just going to look at them and say, I'm really sorry. We want you to be part of our group. We want you to be able to communicate in case of an emergency. But because you don't want to take this test, we have to put you off here to the side where you can't use a radio. And I think that's really unfortunate because there are programs like G.M.R.S, General Mobile Radio Service, that allow people to communicate. And you do have access to repeater sites. A lot of people think that when you buy a G.M.R.S radio, it's just Simplex. It's radio to radio. That completely depends on the type of radio you buy. If you buy some of those Walmart type Motorola talkabout radios like I showed in the picture a little while ago, that's correct. They're just one radio to another radio. If you buy a nicer radio, one that's made for commercial purposes, we'll talk about this too, it allows you to have repeater access on GMRS. All right, the other set of frequencies that you can use is on VHF, and it's called MURS. It's Multi-Use Radio Service. And this is open for the general public. There's no license required. It only operates in Simplex, and it's on VHF. We use this in our CERT group here in Stanislaus County, so we can talk when we're doing search and rescue in close proximity to each other. And we use GMRS repeaters when we're trying to talk all the way across the county. So you can use different types of communications. We might use ham, we might use GMRS, we might use MURS. They each have their own capabilities. So you just be familiar with those. And I'm sure there's people in your group that are ham radio operators or GMRS radio operators, and you can talk with them and figure out what's best for your group. The most important thing is repeater access. You really need to have repeater access, and you can do that through GMRS or ham radio. In California, there's many sites that are high-level locations. Where I live here in the Central Valley, the most popular one is Mount Oso. There's also Don Pedro Reservoir, Mount Diablo that covers the valley and the Bay Area, Mount Zion, Mount Vaca. These probably are starting to ring a bell with some of you radio guys because you've heard that there's ham radio repeaters on these hilltops. What a lot of you don't realize is there's also GMRS repeaters on these hill sites as well. You just need to go to a website and figure out what's available to you. Take a look at the map and familiarize yourself with these hilltops. These aren't all the ones in California, but these are some of the most popular, the most well-known. And I guarantee you, each of these hill sites has GMRS repeaters right alongside ham radio repeaters. They have the same coverage area and they have the same capabilities too, but you just need to learn what they are and where they are. So find the repeater that works well in your area. Meet the owners of the repeater. Do you have permission to use it? Maybe you live in an area where you found a repeater that works really well and you told your CERT team, this is the repeater we're going to use. But maybe the person that owns the repeater hasn't given you permission to use that for your CERT group. I would recommend finding out, meeting that person, sitting down with them, and seeing if that's okay. Find out with the repeaters that you're using in your CERT group, what happens if the power goes out? Many times with winter storms and fires in the hills, there's many things that can affect the power. What capabilities does the repeater that you're designated to use, what capabilities does it have? Does it have battery backup? If it does, how long do the batteries last? Are you only going to be able to use that repeater for 2 days until the car batteries die? Maybe they have backup generators. Okay, so let's say they have a propane generator that'll last 2 weeks. Well, that's good to know because without power, after 2 weeks, all of your communications are going to go down in your area. So find out what these can do. Some of you you're sponsoring agencies or fire departments and police departments. You can go to your supervisors for your county, or there should be a communications director that manages the public safety repeaters. Many times they already have a building on one of these hilltops and you're able to just negotiate with them and say, hey, I have this repeater. Can I just store it in your cabinet up on the hilltop and use your tower? We'll put up an antenna with it and you can create your own repeater for CERT and use the county's facilities they already have in these locations and their backup power. So there's not going to be a huge expenditure on your part as a CERT team to reinvent the wheel. All you need to do is get permission to add your GMRS or ham radio repeater to their facility. Another thing to keep into consideration are there other groups planning on using the repeater that you've chosen during a disaster or an emergency? So with ham radio, there's all these groups called ARES, Amateur Radio Emergency Services. If you're using a radio repeater that's used for ARES, ARES is their own entity. In the case of an emergency, the Ham Radio Club or the ARES Club is going to be using that repeater full time to coordinate disaster operations on that repeater. Will your CERT team be able to use the repeater during an emergency, or will it be completely taken over by ARES? Some of your counties or your CERT groups, you have ARES members in your CERT groups and you're already coordinated to work together, and that's great. But don't be surprised if during a disaster, if you've picked a repeater that has an ARES group that uses that same repeater, you may not be able to use the repeater as you intended because the ARES members are completely taking over the entire repeater system. Just something to keep in mind. This is a website called mygmrs.com. That's www.my, Mary Yankee, GMRS.com. This is a great resource for you if you're new to communications, new to GMRS, and you want to find out more. Ham radio has a huge infrastructure of clubs available to you. You can just type in the county you're in or the area you're in. You're going to probably Google all kinds of clubs and repeaters that are already in place. My GMRS is kind of the same way to look up repeaters in your area that might work for your community. So right here, you're going to want to create an account, and you go up here to repeaters and you click on that. This is a list of, it should be of all the repeaters in our country. It goes from Kentucky to California to Massachusetts, North Carolina. So you want to go up here to advanced search, click on that. And here you can go to state. We're in California, so I'm going to click California. And now this is all the repeaters. Down here in the lower right hand corner, this is repeaters 1 through 10 of 128. So not every repeater registers on this website. So there's actually more than 128 repeaters that are available for you to use, but there's 128 that are just registered here. And you can go page by page. Oop, I'm going to go back to the first page here. Take a look at this right here. Alamo CERT in Alamo, California. There you go, guys. Great job, Alamo CERT. And right here we have Danville CERT. So this is perfect. You guys are already utilizing GMRS. This is fantastic. All right, let's see here. We got some other ones. We're on page 2. So some of these are connected to apps like Zello. Oh, La Miranda CERT. Hey, Lafayette. We're going to call you guys out there. And Moraga CERT. Orinda CERT. Great job. Let's see who else we have in here. So when you find a repeater that you want to join, you can click on it. Some of them have coverage maps that you can look at. Here's one of mine right here. This is one of my repeaters, Madera, California GMRS system. If you click on that, it'll show you the coverage map. It'll have a way for you to contact me to get access. So there's a lot of repeaters on here. I would highly recommend you guys come in here and take a look around to see what'll work in your community. There's another way to search for repeaters, and that's via a map. But I want to tell you, not all of these repeaters are on the map. So this is a complete listing here, repeater by repeater. But the map is not going to have them all because it's up to the repeater owner to put them on the map. And if they don't take the time to do that, it's not helpful, and you're not going to even know about the repeater unless you go through this entire list. So I'll show you here up at the top where it says map. Click on that. Okay, so here's the United States, and you can see right here in the Central Valley it says 60, or the Bay Area. That means if I zoom in, there's going to be 60 repeaters represented by this one bubble. So I'm going to move it over here to the center, and we're going to start zooming in. All right, so each of these repeaters is listed here. Not all of them on that list that we saw are going to be here, but if you click on that, it's going to zoom in. We have Mountaintop 2 Vallejo. You put your cursor over it. See that big? That's the, oh wow, that's great. It goes Fairfield, Vacaville, all the way through the Bay Area. This one down here doesn't have as broad a coverage. It's probably not a high level repeater. Pleasant Hill, La Miranda CERT, Moraga CERT. So here you go, guys. This is a great tool for you to use anywhere in California. You want to know. Yep, look at that. Oh, this is great. So take a look at this. I think you'll find it a great tool. It's called mygmrs.com. And if you don't find what you want on the map, go through the list. Maybe you'll find something that works better for you. Here's a repeater that I built. This is in Stanislaus County, and it covers from Stockton all the way down through Atwater. We weren't able to build an entire tower site, so I was able to construct a ground-mounted antenna system, a solar array, and we also run a packet radio station for ham radio out of this. But this is a GMRS repeater, and it's called the Stanislaus repeater. Here's a little clip of what we're using. We're using 4 L16 batteries in series to make 24 volts, and we have a Hytera RD982IS model that links to other repeaters, and we have a duplexer, solar power controller, and all these things are up on a hillside all by themselves. There's no commercial power to them, and even if the sun's not shining, we should still have backup power for about 2 weeks on this repeater system. It was crucial to me to make sure that even when everything else goes down, if there's an EMP, nothing will affect this. This antenna system has EMP filtering on it, so it's not tied in any way to commercial power. This is a coverage map of the repeater system of the Stanislaus repeater. And you can kind of see if there's a radio website up there, Radio Mobile Online VE2 Delta Bravo Echo.com. If you go to that website, this is how I generated that map. If you're looking to build a repeater site or add an antenna to your firehouse, maybe you already have a tower in place, you can go to this website, you can create an account and tell the computer system how high your antenna is going to be, how many watts you're going to put out, and it will generate based on topographical maps your coverage area for your repeater system. That way, before you invest all the time and money to build something, you can see what to expect out of it. This is our full repeater system. Starting on number 44, we have a repeater up on Sunol that covers the entire Bay Area and has a little window over to Stockton and all the way up through El Dorado Hills. And then number 40 is the Stanislaus repeater that covers a lot of the Central Valley. And then number 39, we have a repeater up in Mariposa that covers all the way from Atwater down to Selma, past Fresno. So all three of these repeaters are GMRS repeaters, and they're linked together through the internet. So when you key up on one, you're going through the entire system, and vice versa. Everybody else is hearing you. So when you look at this system and you look at this coverage map, some of you are just shaking your head going, GMRS is not ham radio. GMRS is not as good as ham radio. Ham radio is so much better. And I've met these people, and I know some of you are thinking that right now. But let me tell you, our sites are 100% solar powered. At least I should say number 40, Stanislaus, and 39, Mariposa, they're completely solar powered. They're off grid. They have EMP filtering. And look at the coverage area of this. Our CERT groups have full access to these repeater sites. They're not based on commercial power. A lot of the ham radio repeaters out there that I've met the repeater owners, I've met the clubs, and a lot of them only have backup power for 2 days and then they go dead. So look at the repeaters you're using, look at their capabilities, find something that's going to work for your CERT group, something that's going to work in a disaster. If the power goes out, what's still going to work? You need to meet your repeater owners. You need to build a hardier infrastructure for your team. All right. I know that was a ton of information, and you might just be shaking your head going, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to learn this? This is way more than I ever bargained for. Keep these simple things in mind. Create structure in your group. Develop a plan. Ask for suggestions in writing. When you're talking about your communications plan for your CERT group, people are very passionate about ham radio in particular. They have a closed mind. They don't want to think about any other way to do things because that's the way they've been doing them for 20, 30 years. So you might meet people, you might have put somebody in charge of communications in your CERT team that all they know and all they can think about is ham radio because they just don't see any other possibility. When you ask for suggestions in writing, it might avoid a lot of conflict in your group because you have those really passionate people, and it's great that they're passionate. It's great that they're knowledgeable about these topics, but when you ask for things in writing, it's going to eliminate that direct conflict. It's going to eliminate that arguing. So that's one of my recommendations. Make sure that all the claims that people are making are supported with facts and not just feelings. If somebody says GMRS is terrible, you can't use repeaters, well, that's obviously a false fact. If they're purchasing GMRS radios that you can't program for repeaters, then yes, that's a problem. But as long as you're buying the right radios, GMRS has the exact same capabilities as ham radio. All right, it's important to standardize. Have 2 recommended radios for your team to purchase. A lot of members go out and they buy their own radios, and as a communications director, when you have 60 different models of radios coming to you, people saying, hey, can you program my radio? I bought this off Amazon last week and I really need this radio programmed. And you look at it and go, oh man, I have to create a whole new code plug. For those of you who are wondering what a code plug is, you have to manually enter all the frequencies, the tones, the offsets. You have to, in the spreadsheet, and you have to create this entire database program just to flash a radio with all the pre-programmed memory channels. So to support 60 different radio models is ridiculous. It's absolutely insane. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. So as a CERT team, think about those steps we talked about earlier. Planning, standardize, Have 2 recommended radios for your team to purchase, and have a code plug for those. Somebody comes up to you during a CERT event and say, hey, let me flash your radio for you. You program everything in there and they're good to go. If they come up with some oddball radio that you don't support, you can say, wow, that's a really nice radio. I'm so happy you made the purchase and the investment to go buy a radio. Unfortunately, I don't have time to program that radio because it's not one that we support. Here are the frequencies. You're welcome to do that on your own time. People don't understand how long this takes to have a standardized program to be able to program everyone's radio. So by having standards, this will cut down on a lot of your time. Support those radios with programming services. That's kind of what we just talked about. Know the radios that you support inside and out. Be able to teach classes and help others with technical support. Over the phone, over a radio, you should be able to tell somebody with the radio that they have, if they have one of your supported radios, how to lock the keypad, how to unlock the keypad, how to change channels, very basic functions. And if you have a standardized system, it's very easy to do. If somebody has some oddball radio from China that you've never heard of, it's going to be really hard for you to support that radio. You can't tell them how to unlock their keypad or change channels. You're going to have a lot of people in your group that come with ham radios. It's really important to know that ham radios can only use ham frequencies like ICOM, Yaesu, Kenwood. There's a bunch of brands out there where they have designated ham radios. When you buy them, all other channels, including GMRS, they're locked out of. I know some of you guys are shaking your head because there's a way to go in there with a soldering iron and pull out those resistors and those little modifications you can make to your ham radio so you can do GMRS with your ham radio. I do want to let you know that's against FCC guidelines or FCC rules, and ham radios can only legally and lawfully transmit on ham radio frequencies. One other thing that some GMRS repeaters do is they do what's called split tones. Without getting too technical, you might have a DCS code to unlock the repeater on one tone, and you might have a receive tone on another frequency or a different set of DCS tones. And ham radios can't do that. They're just very, very limited. So if you have a lot of people buying ham radios and you decide as a CERT team you're going to do only GMRS or a GMRS emphasis on your team, you might have a lot of people that are upset because they have all this money invested in ham radios that now they can't use on the GMRS system. Something to keep in mind for you. Commercial radios that you buy, they can do ham radio, they can do GMRS radio, and they can also do MURS. They can do all the radios. Most commercial radios have a full spectrum of frequencies available. They will do whatever you tell them to do. They're much more flexible that way. Some of the commercial radios, I prefer, my number one favorite is an Anytone radio. Those range probably about $230 for a good Anytone radio. TYT is my next favorite one, and that one, let's see here. They're about $105 for a good TYT radio. Baofeng is one that we recommend as a starter radio for our county. There's also Motorola. Those are pretty high-end radios. Kenwood, Hytera, and Vertex. There's a lot available. And when you buy these commercial radios, like I said, the commercial radios are fantastic. They can do the split tones we talked about. They can do ham radio. They can do commercial radio. They can do FRS radio. They're just much more flexible. When you buy radios, make sure they can be used on a repeater. Some radios you might buy on Amazon, they're preset and they cannot be used on repeaters. That's very important. Do your homework, guys. The entry-level radio that we recommend for our CERT group here in Stanislaus counties is made by Baofeng. It's a UV82HP. They run about $70. I think they're like a 6 or 7 watt radio. And one thing I really like about this, I chose this for an entry-level radio because you can monitor 2 frequencies at the same time. And unlike some of the earlier models of Baofeng, you don't have to press a button to switch between the upper and lower channels. This has, on the left side, you see transmit A and transmit B. It has 2 push-to-talks. It makes it much more user-friendly. If you press the upper push-to-talk, you're talking on transmitter A. If you press the transmit B button below it, now you're talking on the lower transmit button. You no longer have to switch between the 2 frequencies to talk on them. You just have 2 push-to-talks. This has simplified things a lot for people that aren't really radio people. It allows them to use the radio with fewer complications. I'll put it that way. When we purchase Baofeng radios, we go through a company called Baofeng Tech. Just do a Google search for Baofeng Tech. It should come up. And when you order from their website, those radios, they're able to transmit on FRS. They're able to transmit on ham radio. They're able to transmit on GMRS. One thing we found is if you buy these same radios through Amazon, sometimes they're locked out and they only work on ham radio. So just be cautious, save your receipts, make sure they're going to work how you want them to work before you throw away the boxes on these guys. All right, the secondary radio that I like is made by TYT. It's kind of the off-brand to Hytera. It's the MD680. These retail for about $105. You can find them on eBay. It takes about 3 weeks for them to come in once you order them. These are only good on 400 to 470 megahertz. So if you're using FRS, GMRS, this is the radio for you. These cases are IP67 rated, which means you can drop them. You could submerge them in water for up to 30 minutes, completely submerged, and they're still going to work. The Baofeng, the one we talked about a minute ago, those are not watertight, and watch out for those. The speaker mic plug on the MD680 takes the same accessories as the Baofeng. So if you're going to start out with a Baofeng radio for $70 and then you switch over to the TYT, all of your accessories are going to work for it. And that's really important when you start recommending and supporting radios for your CERT program. Make sure that the accessories will carry over. The Anytone radio also has the same wiring as the TYT and the Baofeng. So all three of those radios, you can switch all your accessories back and forth and they work just fine. This one only has one transmit button and it has a turn dial on top for the radio or for the different channels you can switch between them. It has 16 channels. You notice there's no buttons on the front. One of the number one complaints we had with our CERT team is there's too many buttons on our radios and people didn't know how to get from one channel to another. So by recommending the TYT MD680 radio, this simplifies things and they're able to just have a 1 through 16 channel switcher on the top. The bad thing is there's no display, so you don't know what each of the channel numbers are. So we came up with these credit card size cards with the channel readout on them. They can put that in their purse or their wallet and pull that out and know what channel they're supposed to be on based on the card. We also have a list of accessories for our county CERT group. There's a lot of cheap stuff out there on eBay. You can buy a speaker mic for $5, but it's not worth the $5. Some of these things are just super cheap and you're not worth your time or money to buy them. I try to help people save money by recommending certain accessories that work really well. So that's the list that I put together here. Feel free to pause and write that down or go take a look at it later. All right, guys, that's the presentation for today. You can find me on Facebook at www.facebook.com/groups/Stanislaus CERT, California CERT Communications Group at www.facebook.com/groups/CA-CERT. Are you using GMRS? Are you using ham radio? Why did you pick those things? Leave a comment, make a video. We're here as an open discussion where we can discuss these sensitive topics. I'll put it to you that way. Don't leave me any hate mail if you don't like GMRS. I understand, but I think it's more inclusive for CERT teams that everybody can participate that wants to participate without taking a test. Hey, thanks for staying tuned to the video today. I hope you guys liked it. I hope it was informative for you. I can't wait to hear about what you do in your groups. Leave comments, like, subscribe, come back, check out our next training video. If you have a training that you'd like me to cover on communications, let me know in the comment section. We'll cover that next time. All right, 73 for now. Take care.